There's something almost magical about Brazilian June festivals. The colors, the music, the warmth of the gatherings, and that feeling of nostalgia in the air make everything taste a little better. And among so many beloved treats, one dessert always stands out for its simplicity and comfort: Curau de Milho. At first glance, it may look like just a humble corn pudding, but anyone who has grown up around Festa Junina knows it carries much more than that. It carries memory. It carries tradition. It carries the kind of flavor that feels like home. Today, I want to show you how I turn a few simple ingredients into something creamy, golden, and deeply satisfying. Fresh green corn, milk, sugar, and a little cinnamon at the end, that's all it takes to create a dessert that has been loved for generations across Brazil. It's the kind of recipe that reminds us how the best dishes are not always the most complicated ones. Sometimes, the secret is in the care, the patience, and the small details that make all the difference. And that's exactly where the real challenge begins. Because curau looks easy, but getting that smooth, velvety texture without lumps can be a puzzle for many people. You may have the right ingredients, you may follow the recipe, and still end up with a result that feels grainy instead of creamy. So what makes the difference? In a moment, I'll show you the step that most people overlook, the one that truly changes everything: straining the mixture properly. It may seem simple, but this is what gives curau its delicate, silky finish. As it slowly cooks, the whole kitchen fills with that sweet corn aroma that feels both rustic and inviting. It's the kind of scent that brings back childhood memories, family tables, and festival nights under colorful flags and warm lights. And beyond being delicious, corn also brings its own natural energy, which makes this dessert feel even more special. It's comforting, yes, but it also has substance. So if you love Brazilian food, if you enjoy traditional desserts with a story, or if you've ever wanted to bring a little taste of Festa Junina into your own kitchen, stay with me. This recipe has heart, culture, and a creamy surprise waiting just ahead. And before we dive in, I have to ask, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Also, if you enjoy recipes like this, go ahead and leave a like and join me for what comes next. Now, here's where the magic starts to reveal itself. I take the fresh green corn and cut the kernels straight from the cob, and even that sound already feels like summer in Brazil. The kitchen fills with the natural sweetness of the corn, almost like it's promising the dessert before it's even made. Then I blend the corn with milk and sugar until everything becomes a pale, fragrant mixture, simple on the surface, but full of possibility. At this point, it may look like just another homemade cream, but this is exactly where the first little mystery of curau appears. How do we turn something so rustic into something so smooth and elegant? That's why the straining step matters so much. I pour the blended mixture through a fine sieve, pressing gently to extract every bit of flavor while leaving the fibers behind. It's tempting to skip this part, especially when you're in a hurry, but that's the mistake that can change everything. If the curau is not strained properly, it can lose that velvety texture that makes it unforgettable. And honestly, that texture is the heart of the recipe. It's what separates a homemade dessert that is merely good from one that feels truly special, the kind people remember from childhood, from June festivals, from warm nights filled with laughter and paper flags. Once strained, the liquid looks silky and pure, and that's when I move it to the pan. On low heat, it slowly begins to thicken, and this is the part that asks for patience. You have to stir, breathe, and let the ingredients do their work. Little by little, the mixture changes. It goes from thin and pale to golden, creamy, and dense, almost like it's waking up as it cooks. The scent becomes deeper too, with that unmistakable aroma of corn and milk mingling together in a way that feels comforting and familiar. And while it cooks, there's something beautiful about remembering that corn is more than just delicious. It's nourishing, full of energy, and deeply connected to everyday life in Brazil. That's part of why curau feels so meaningful. It's not a fancy dessert trying to impress anyone. It's honest, warm, and generous, the kind of recipe that brings people closer with every spoonful. If you're enjoying this journey through Brazilian flavors, take a moment to leave a like, because the best part is still coming. And I'm curious, what's the one thing about Brazil you'd most like to discover next? Once the corn is ready, the kitchen starts to feel different. There's something about the scent of fresh green corn that instantly brings back memories of June festivals, when the air seems to carry laughter, music, and the promise of something sweet cooking nearby. I like to pour the milk in slowly and watch the kernels blend into a pale, fragrant cream, almost as if the recipe is revealing its own secret little by little. And that's really the charm of Curau de Milho. It looks simple, but the magic is hidden in the details. At this point, the most important step happens before the pan ever touches the heat. Straining the mixture properly is what separates a silky, dreamy Curau from one that feels heavy or grainy. Many people rush this part, thinking the blender did all the work, but the truth is that patience here changes everything. When you press the mixture through the sieve, what remains is the smooth, rich liquid that will turn into that golden dessert so loved across Brazil. It's a small step, but it solves the whole puzzle. Then the mixture goes to the stove, and the transformation begins. Over low heat, with steady stirring, it slowly thickens and takes on that creamy body that makes Curau so comforting. I always find this moment almost meditative. The bubbling is soft, the color grows deeper, and the kitchen fills with the warm aroma of corn and milk. It's the kind of dessert that doesn't ask for hurry. It asks for attention, care, and a little affection. And maybe that's why Curau feels so special on Festa Junina tables. It's not just a sweet dish, it's part of a celebration that values tradition, family, and simple pleasures. A spoonful brings together the taste of the countryside, the joy of the party, and the comfort of something made at home. If you're enjoying this recipe so far, leave a like to let me know, because there's still a beautiful finishing touch coming up. And if you've ever wondered how a humble ingredient like corn becomes such an iconic Brazilian dessert, stay with me, because the final texture is where everything truly comes together. Now comes the part where this simple mixture starts revealing its real secret. As the milk, corn, and sugar go into the blender, everything looks ordinary at first, almost too simple for a dessert so loved across Brazil. But that's exactly where the charm begins. Curau de Milho doesn't rely on complicated techniques or fancy ingredients. What gives it its magic is the care and the process, especially when we pass the mixture through the sieve. This step may seem small, but it's the difference between a silky, comforting cream and a Curau with that grainy texture nobody wants to find in the spoon. And if you've ever wondered why some curas come out smoother than others, here is the answer hiding in plain sight: patience. The corn needs to be well blended, and then even better strained. It's a little puzzle that many people only understand after trying once and learning from the result. That's why this recipe feels so honest. It teaches us that good Brazilian cooking is often about paying attention to the details, not rushing the moment. One careful step leads to another, and before you know it, the kitchen starts to smell like tradition. As the mixture goes to the pan, the transformation becomes almost mesmerizing. At first it still seems loose, almost shy, but little by little the heat changes everything. The cream thickens, the color deepens into a warm yellow, and the whole kitchen takes on that cozy feeling we associate with June festivals, when families gather, music plays, and everything seems a little more cheerful. There's something beautiful in watching a humble ingredient like corn become a dessert that carries memory, celebration, and comfort all at once. And besides all the flavor, there's a nice bonus in this old-fashioned treat. Corn is naturally energizing, which makes each spoonful feel even more nourishing. It's the kind of dessert that satisfies without needing to be complicated. Just simple ingredients, handled with care, turning into something unforgettable. If you're enjoying this recipe so far, leave a like to let me know you're loving these Brazilian classics. And tell me in the comments, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? I'd really love to read it. And if you enjoy discovering recipes like this, stay close, because in the next part I'm going to show you exactly when the Curau reaches that perfect creamy point. As the mixture begins to warm, something almost magical happens in the pan. What looked like a simple blend of corn, milk, and sugar slowly starts to thicken, and the kitchen fills with that soft, familiar aroma that feels like a June festival in the air. This is the moment when patience matters most, because Curau is not a dessert that likes to be rushed. It asks for calm heat, steady stirring, and a little trust in the process. And here is where the real puzzle comes in. If the corn pulp wasn't strained properly, the texture can turn grainy instead of silky, and that changes everything. The secret to a beautiful Curau de Milho is not just in the ingredients, but in the care you give them after blending. Once you pour the mixture through a fine sieve, you can already feel the difference. What remains is pure, smooth cream, ready to become that velvety spoonful everyone remembers from childhood, church fairs, and festive Junina tables full of color and tradition. As it thickens, the curau becomes richer, more golden, and more comforting. You can see it slowly transforming, almost like it's telling its own story in the pan. The spoon leaves gentle paths through the cream, and for a moment, everything feels warm and nostalgic. This is the kind of dessert that doesn't need to impress with complexity. Its charm is in its simplicity, in the honest sweetness of fresh corn, and in the way it brings people together. There's also something grounding about making a recipe like this. Corn has always been part of Brazilian life, feeding families and carrying memories from one generation to the next. So when you prepare curau, you are not just cooking a dessert. You are keeping a tradition alive, one that belongs to the heart of Festa Junina and to all the homes where this flavor is loved. If this kind of Brazilian recipe speaks to you, take a moment to leave a like, because it really helps this tradition reach more people. And I have to ask, what's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Whether it's our food, our festivals, or the stories behind them, I'd love to know. And if you enjoy discovering classic Brazilian recipes like this one, make sure to subscribe, because there is still a sweet final touch coming next. And just like that, the curau is ready to tell its story. You can see it now, smooth, golden, and quietly shining in the bowl, with that cinnamon on top like the final brushstroke on a homemade painting. What began as a few simple ingredients has turned into one of those desserts that feels bigger than itself, because it carries the warmth of a Brazilian June celebration in every spoonful. This is the kind of recipe that proves tradition doesn't have to be complicated to be special. Fresh corn, milk, sugar, and patience are enough to create something comforting, nostalgic, and deeply satisfying. And if there is one detail that makes all the difference, it is straining the mixture well. That is the little secret that protects the texture and gives curau its famous creaminess. Once you understand that, the recipe stops being a mystery and becomes a joy to repeat. I always like to imagine this dessert on a Festa Junina table, surrounded by laughter, music, paper flags, and the smell of warm spices in the air. It is the kind of food that makes people pause for a moment, smile, and remember something sweet from childhood. Maybe that is why Curau de Milho has remained so loved for so long. It is simple, but it feels generous. It is humble, but it leaves an impression. And beyond the flavor, there is something lovely about cooking with corn, a natural source of energy that turns this dessert into more than just a treat. It is a recipe that nourishes the body and comforts the heart at the same time. That balance is part of what makes Brazilian home cooking so beautiful. If you enjoyed this recipe and want more traditional Brazilian dishes brought to you in a clear, easy, and flavorful way, go ahead and leave a like. And now I'm curious to know you better. What's your biggest curiosity about Brazil? Share it in the comments, because I'd love to read your answer. And if you enjoy discovering these classic recipes with heart, subscribe so we can keep cooking together.